Two really good days, energy and effort. They're starting to understand the tempo needed to practice. They're starting to understand why we practice the way we do. Now we got to continue to combine that with the fundamental discipline, obviously the football discipline, making sure we're line right, watching the ball, those type of things. But the energy and effort is really good. That means they're starting to embrace our culture and our expectations. The discipline is what we got to continue to coach, and that's not jumping off sides or whatever. That's my hand placement, my eyes, making sure I'm making the right checks, making sure I'm taking the right steps. But overall, two really good days compared to the first 2 days without pads. Put the pads on. You can see the size and physicality that we anticipated guys to have showing up with a lot more consistency. Going last night or yesterday afternoon with a physical practice, turning around and doing it again today. Typically, you have a little bit of a lull. We didn't have that, which is good. I challenged the leaders to make sure that we were able to kind of rebound and follow up. And I thought they did a good job of that. Obviously, got a lot of things to go back and clean up from a fundamental technique standpoint, schematically, but really good what they can control. They control their energy and their effort. That was good. We as coaches got to continue to hone in on the fundamental discipline. So that opened up questions. The fundamental consistency. We've got a good group on both sides, so there's going to be back and forth. But the back and forth should not be because I took bad steps or I had bad posture. The back and forth should be because I did what I needed to do. He did what he needed to do a little bit better. Now I can come back and do it again. So far, we've done a really good job. The way we practice staying off the ground is huge. Making sure guys aren't on the ground. We've got to make some decisions as we go through this, how much we tackle, how much we don't. Where we are in college football, we just don't have enough guys to start, losing guys. So we got to make sure we fundamentally do everything to replicate a tackle, to replicate movement without, falling on the ground and doing those things. But O-line and D-line, I've been impressed. Both groups have done a good job. There's been good back and forth. There's some guys that obviously are standouts, and you can see them show up over and over. What we started to see the last couple of days is back and forth. Defense make a play, offense make a play. Defense make a play, offense make a play. And to me, that's them controlling the mental disposition, because typically what happens in games is mistakes snowball because mentally you can't snap into the next play. That's why we try to practice at such a high tempo. So you don't have a chance to think about what just happened. You got to think about what's coming next. So good start by both of those groups. Got to continue to develop some guys because, like you said, at some point, obviously injuries are a part of the game, and no one wants to hear me stand up here and talk about, because he's hurt, we weren't able to execute. So got to continue to develop the depth so we can continue to have the same type of consistency. Probably a little bit too early to kind of jump out because the first couple of practices were no pads. So the skill guys who run around were able to have a little bit more consistency because of the lack of physicality in running routes and covering. The O-line, D-line showed up in the last couple of days because of the physicality and being able to move guys up front, which allowed the running backs to kind of have a little bit better day in the run game. But overall, the guys that we've kind of expected are doing what we expected. When you have good players, Kobe Bryant didn't go into the offseason trying to learn how to shoot a jumper. He was trying to figure out, how can I condition my body to play 2 more minutes? How can I work on changing my game just a little bit? So those guys who we anticipate, the Ian Fosters, the Jamon Tapps, those guys have played a lot of football. So when they make a play, it's not, oh, man, that's great. When they make a play, it's like, okay, how many of those can you string together in a row? Some of the guys that maybe jumped out that I haven't necessarily seen play other than recruiting, Manny Covey's doing some really good things in the backfield. the last couple of days. Obviously, when the O-line's able to lean on guys a little more, that helps. Jalen Carter's done some things. Dallin Hayden has had some powerful runs now that he can run behind his pads. All three quarterbacks have had moments. We're trying to string the consistency together, but I think they've all had moments where you're like, that's pretty good. So as this thing goes on, I think what starts to happen is we get more impressed with the consistency than the one great play, if that makes sense. We've got some receivers that'll make a one-handed catch and come back and drop a slant, so we're trying to balance that great catch, good job. Okay, the consistency of that is what we're looking for. I think they're starting to understand it because they're starting to hold themselves accountable when the consistent plays, or the layups, we call them, aren't made across the board. So that's a positive. That's a positive.
When you look at the quarterbacks, a weekend, both in terms of how they develop and like that, but also the leadership part of it, bringing together these
The biggest thing that I've seen is self-accountability so far. They are really holding themselves to a high standard. When we went into the spring, we told the team, we're competing with ourselves. You are competing with yourself every play, every day, every period. And I'm starting to see the quarterbacks really hold themselves accountable, meaning making sure that their feet are at the right depth, making sure they're communicating, making sure when they do go to the sideline, they're communicating with their teammates on what they saw. They're in the building all the time trying to, watch film and get extra work. I don't think you can hold someone else accountable until you're able to hold yourself accountable. And I think what happens a lot of times is players respect those guys that hold themselves to a certain standard. It's easy to yell, let's go, let's go, let's go. But it's really good when they see there's a ball that's a little bit behind the receiver and they're more upset about the ball a little bit behind the receiver, even though he caught it, than they are. There's accountability with, hey, I got to get the ball out quicker. Hey, I got to communicate better. So all three of those guys have done a really good job of that. The vocalness between the three of them are about the same. Denzel's a quiet kid, but he's been vocal, which when he talks, it's like, whoa. Air and Marcus have done they talk a lot. Does that make sense? So when they talk, you're used to hearing it. But when Denzel goes over to a wide receiver, it says, hey man, break it in a little bit faster, whatever. Now you're starting to get that self accountability, that self holding yourself to a standard that we're looking for.
Hey, Coach, spring is the time you get to know each other. You put the players is nothing different. What are you doing for not the off-field chemistry, but the on-field chemistry spring to make this team really good?
Yeah, well, I think it starts off the field. So one thing we've done is every month, we got here in January, every month we've done something outside of this building. Started with really February because we got here at the end of January. We went to the Civil Rights Museum. We went to the Grizzlies game. We went to Top Golf. Once you start to do that off the field, it'll carry over on the field because it's easier for me to hold you accountable, say, hey, man, I need you. Hey, man, make sure you're watching this when I've actually learned your name off the field. It's hard to just run out there and be like, hey, number 7, move over. It's hard to do. But when we spend time off the field, the biggest thing for these guys is in the locker room. You battle on the field, but in the locker room, you're having those moments where you're saying, hey, on this play, this is what I look at to help me execute better. We're getting a lot of that. I do think our routine of lifting, meeting, team meeting, individual meetings forces them to be around each other a lot, which again gets into that, hey, this is what I see, this is what I saw, this is what I was thinking. So it's been good. We got a lot of work to do. We've got to get to the point to where everybody's holding each other accountable, starting with myself. When the first group runs out, second group runs out, third, whoever runs out, there's got to be an expectation of execution. There's got to be a disappointment and failure, not just because, oh, I wasn't out there, but hey, man, I'm counting on you. That'll take time. That'll be August when we really start to understand who's who. But the start has been good, if that makes sense. Yeah, there's a lot of carryover from what we did at Southern Miss. So there's a lot of players that have done that. When we went into the portal, we tried to recruit players to this system. You know, guys that ran some type of 4 down front, guys that ran some type of, zone coverage, a little bit of man. So some of the verbiage has been carried over. The biggest thing that I'm seeing is everyone is vocal. So that way, even if I'm not sure, I can hear somebody else communicate. I can hear somebody else, make a check. I can hear somebody else, let me know where the tight end is, where the back is. That takes personal accountability, because if I don't say anything, I can't echo the call. If I don't communicate what I see, my part of what I see, that doesn't help the next level. So we've gotten some really good verbal communication, one, because some of the terminology is carried over. One of the reasons I hired Lance was because this defense started kind of with Lance. When Coach Seymour took over, we kind of kept some of the verbiage the same. When I worked for Coach Saban, the verbiage never changed, even though the coaches did. And we've tried as much as possible to keep it the same. So even when Coach Guidry came back, there were some things that we had added, or some things we called certain things. He wasn't calling them that in his past, but he converted to that to help the players learn a little bit faster. So that's been good. Obviously, offensively, it's brand new for everyone, so that's a little bit different. But defensively, there's a lot of carryover and consistency. Great. Yeah, I think it gives them someone to go and ask the real questions. Sometimes you sit in a meeting with a coach and you're like, I don't really know that. Maybe I'm not bold enough to raise my hand and say, Coach, I don't understand. But now I go in the locker room and I can ask one of the guys who's run it before, what does this mean? I can go to one of the guys who got a really good grasp and say, what did Coach mean in the meeting, or what is this? I think the players are also doing a good job of kind of passing it along. They see guys who have talent and they want them to play well. And they're helping communicate. They're helping coach each other on the sideline. There are some technique and fundamental things that we've carried over that some of the new guys haven't done before, and our guys are kind of helping coach. Hey, this is what coach means when he says use your hands. This is what coach means when he says this step. And I think that's helping. They want to win. Not necessarily everyone doesn't know how to win, because everybody's different. But they want to win, so they want to be able to pass the information along. I think it comes back to there's a lot of guys that know, so they're comfortable. So it's a little bit easier for me to go to a guy, at my position and say, what does that mean? What did he say when he said this? Watching it on film, I watch the guy in front of me, whether I'm a 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever. I'm watching the other guy. You can learn a lot by just watching. You got to go out and do it, but you can learn a lot from watching, or ask, why did you play that way, or why did you take that step? I think that's helped. Now, we're only a couple installs in, so we've got to be able to continue that as we go. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.